Welcome to the Bearded Finisher Podcast, your one-stop show for all things finishing and coatings. Your host, Zach, and a variety of industry experts will guide you through the art of perfecting your finishing and business game. From seasoned pros to fresh faces, get ready for tips, tricks, and trends to elevate your knowledge and business to the next level.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Bearded Finisher Podcast. I'm your host, Zach. Today's episode, we have got Mr. Alex, I'm going to go with Koves from Toronto, Canada. He has a company called Markov. What's going on, Alex?
Oh, I'm pretty good. Yeah. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing great, man. So did I say your last name right, or did I butcher it?
You know what? You got it close. You got the most common guess, so I'll give you points for that. No, it's actually Koves. Yeah.
Koves. I was gonna say Koves. Dang it! I should have gone with it.
Yeah. You know what? My grandparents came from Hungary, and they changed the pronunciation of the name to make it easy, and so they arbitrarily picked something easy that is not obvious. So I'll blame them for that one. Yeah,
that's all right. I mean, I was gonna ask you. I was like, "Where's the roots of that?" So Hungary, that's crazy.
Yeah, it should be Koves. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I would have butchered that one altogether. Man, let's just kick things off. Tell us about your backstory. How did you come into the? Because you have ERP software, so we'll kind of dig into that. So how did you get where you're at?
I think the story is really a story of complexity, right? And looking for complexity where we could find it. I've always had the viewpoint that there's massive potential for finding solutions. Where you find complexity, there's usually value buried there, and when you can tame it, and so I think that's really a starting point. People say keep it simple, and I mean, there's truth to that. But in our case, we look to find that complexity and transform it to simplicity.
Simple doesn't always get us covered.
Exactly. But Markov started its existence as a family business in the 80s. My parents founded it.
Wow.
And yeah, that's right. Now, back in those days, it was still about looking for complexity, but it was custom software. So they would do accounting systems, point of sale systems. Those were the good old days where a lot of custom software development in North America. So it wasn't until later on when I got involved about 10 years ago, we really found our focus in manufacturing. So it was great because we were like, this is a space that has plenty of complexity, and we wanted to go super deep in there, find all the dark corners, at the production facility where we could get rid of paper and Excel and kind of shine the light there and get those things tamed. And that became our niche.
Yeah. I mean, and the good thing about the niche of like the ERP resource planning softwares is there's not very many small guys that can really give you the good one-on-one service. Most of it's your big SAP, and there's other large guys out there, but being that smaller niche supplier and developer definitely has its privileges and its advantages, I would think.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that focus really gives us the power to build that connection, right? So when you go to an SAP or a NetSuite or whatever, that consulting engagement becomes just so much more complex from the fact that whether you're like a franchise of yoga studios or a telecom company or a paint manufacturer, right? Like they can all use NetSuite. So, and you can imagine imagine the complexity of that. So I staying super focused. And for us, it's not just manufacturing, right? Like it's batch process manufacturing. Unless you mix together liquids and powders, we're not interested in you, right? So it really kind of tames that a bit.
So for those guys that are kind of don't know much, just kind of give a quick rundown on how you guys operate as far as the ERP and what your specialty, where you guys really dig in on the coatings and batch processing side so people can understand it.
Absolutely. Our mission is to help manufacturers stay organized and tame the complexity as they scale up. We do that by providing software that's built from a shop floor perspective, shop floor first. And that's really what differentiates us from your typical ERP. Most ERPs are built from the accounting out. They start with the general ledger and payables and receivables and invoices, but we're built from the batch card first, right? And so that really differentiates us and kind of shows where our focus is that our focus is on the floor. And that kind of connects as well. Our typical new customer uses QuickBooks, and in addition to QuickBooks, they've got these layers of Excel spreadsheets and paperwork and paper documentation that fills in those dark spaces, those complex spaces we talked about that QuickBooks doesn't cover. So the inventory planning, keeping the revision history for their formulas, the quality control records, I could go on and on. All of that stuff, we will come in, sweep away all that paper in Excel, tame all of that stuff and manage it, and then just leave QuickBooks to manage the accounting, right? So that's really our approach, and our approach is to come in and help those growing manufacturers who are ready, who are in pain from having those paper and Excel records that are really hard to scale. And you got to give people credit. People can do some amazing things with Excel, but there's always a limit. So depending on how much of a genius you've got, as your production manager or purchasing manager or whatever, they can get a lot done. But every company hits its point where that starts to become really painful to continue with, and that's where we can come in and really help out.
That wall is pretty hard. So you and I kind of met during my time at CIC when you guys came in and helped us do a lot of streamlining. Is it typically pretty challenging to get these guys out of their own way, any manufacturer? Because, we're talking about proverbial engineers when you get into the chemistry side and all that stuff when it's any type of batch manufacturing. And, anybody who knows engineers knows that,
Yeah, people have their ways, that's for sure. And that's one of the ways that, or one of the reasons why being so focused is really helpful, right? Because we've seen a lot of paint factories. And so we can come in there and say, hey, look, we've seen it done these 3 ways, and here's why it's effective. And rather than just coming in fresh and we have an established approach that, with a track record, which goes a long way there. But to your point, is it hard? Well, sure. There's the statistics are pretty crazy on it, and no one knows exactly because but McKinsey put it at over 75% of ERP implementations fail. And that's I mean, you got yeah. So it's you got a less than a 1 in 4 shot at getting to the end. We do way better than that. We're up above 65% success rate, but to me, there's 2 things, right, that allow us to keep a super high success rate on these projects. And the first one is what we talked about. It's the focus, right? So we don't have to have as many configurations. There's not as much friction because we've seen a lot of paint factories. So there's not oh, how does that work? You've got to figure that out. So the path is a little bit, much smoother there. And then the second piece is our people, right? So we really focus on that, keeping those knowledgeable implementers, developing them, nurturing them over a long period of time. And, and it ties back into that focus. So the implementer has seen a few factories, has done multiple projects in that, their last project wasn't a telecom project. It was also a manufacturer, right? So, those 2 pieces, really help.
Yeah, the nuances of batch manufacturing is definitely very unique compared to any other type of manufacturing. So the fact that you guys are keying in on that's a nice niche area to be into.
There's a lot of weird, complex stuff that's different and that you can come in and where a NetSuite or an SAP, as big and powerful as they are going to hit some snags when they really get in the weeds there. So, but those remaining ones that don't succeed, the main thing is people need to invest in change. And this is, an ERP implementation is an example of organizational change, and companies need to understand at the start of that yes, it's investment, in capital, but putting the right people on the project and giving them the time and space to work on it. Failing to do that and give the project the investment it deserves internally is the biggest challenge that we see. So of course, we're upfront about that, and we talk about that at the start, and when people get it, then things go really smoothly.
That reminds me of a book I just read. There's a book, a guy named Ben, and then, what is that guy's name? He's with a company called Strategic Entrepreneur, and he has a book called Who Not How. So, and it kind of emphasizes, I don't know if you've read it or not, about not focusing on how you can do stuff. Find a who that can do things you don't know how to do, because you'll spend way more time trying to figure out how to do it. And then it kind of talks about the investment into people. You can't think of people or software like this as like, what's my ROI? You have to think about it as an investment. And it's a long-term investment, because, these processes aren't fast by any means. What would you say the average comfortable implementation time is to go from nothing to an ERP?
The average is 9 months. Yeah. So it's a long time. I think the record, our record, which may never be broken, is 3 months for an implementation, and all the stars aligned perfectly in that case, where there was a lot. The commitment and invest to change was really there.
Wow, what's the longest one on the flip end?
So there have been a couple where the thing is, and here's the cool thing though as well, right? So there's this question of scope as well, because we can do so much. So let's talk. For example, we have a module that tracks equipment and the preventative maintenance and cleaning schedules for equipment, right? So very often what will happen is, like, we'll go through, and during the discovery phase, we find out what's most important to a customer and what their biggest challenges are. And we narrow the project scope down to the point where they're getting a ton of value, but that also it's like a digestible project, right? So very often we'll do an implementation, it'll be successful, we'll be like, and discussion with the customers, like, yeah, okay, we've solved inventory. We know what our inventory is. We have a plan to fill our stock. We're shipping orders on time. We know our costs, so we can properly set our pricing. Those were our main challenges. Solved. What's next, right? And then we start to go back to the discovery and unpack those things that were, not the top of the list before, but now become it. So it can be like, so the journey can be years before, things get fully and totally unpacked in that way. But there's, the ROI happens much sooner. Obviously, you solve those initial challenges.
Yeah, the initial challenge. I've long been a believer in business. The easiest and the fastest way to get business is to solve problems. If you can solve a manufacturing company's or any company's problem, you can solve their problem, you got their business, because that's all it's about, is solving problems.
Yeah, and we always try to do, like, we always look for those quick bite-sized wins at the start of the project. We really find that's a helpful way to move. Oftentimes we start with a company and they say, look, we just need to be able to, like, we're in super big pain because we have a hard time pricing out new formulas, right? We have a new formula, and we'll say, okay, look, fine. Phase one of the project is get, management and control over your vendor price lists, your, formula and revision control there, and give you some predictive costing so that you can, better and more confidently set prices. But that's great, because that's a stepping stone. You've got the formulas in now, and you've got the vendors in, and you've got the vendor pricing in. And so you start to put together this puzzle of a complete deployment. you know, but this is where the experience of our implementers comes in, is they know what the big picture is, but based upon what are the biggest pain points of the customer, they put that puzzle together in a different sequence depending on the customer to ensure that they get a quick win, right? Like
Yes,
we
yes.
want to get you that first win and get you the ROI.
Yeah, you taste the success and you want more.
Exactly. If and there when I mention a 9-month typical implementation time, they're tasting wins. We try to get them to taste the win in the first month, right? So that they can sort of get some wind at their backs and get that momentum going.
And it keeps them bought in too. I'm bought in, like not saying, all right, we're 60 days in and this isn't working. We're just struggling. And, they see the little wins, the little successes. I mean, that's a smart way. So on your implementers, are they essentially implementers, project managers? Does each implementer have one customer or do they have multiple customers and they're...
Yeah, we have a dedicated implementer that'll stay with a customer from beginning to end of the project. Yeah. And we do have people with focuses in different verticals as well. So, we'll have somebody who develops a bunch of experience in paints and coatings, and another implementer who's got a lot of experience in personal care cosmetics, and another one in food and beverage. And, we cross-train and so on, but again, like, you dig into that complexity and sure, everyone's mixing together liquids and powders and they've got quality control processes and they pack it out. But then, so although we can say a paint company and a shampoo company are very similar, right? If you just look oh yeah, we're mixing together liquids and powders. We do some testing, some analytical testing. We do all this stuff. When you really dig in under the hood, you will find differences. And so we try to give the space and respect to those differences and acknowledge that again, we know that our advantage is we take away as much of that friction as possible in the implementation, and that means really knowing and understanding what that customer's needs are, having an anticipation of what those needs are based upon experience.
Yeah, that's sort of that, that the implementer having that knowledge or history definitely makes a difference.
You even get within paints and coatings, right? Like the difference between, a super technical industrial coating for a specific purpose versus, something that's more for retail, versus, we work with a company that does kids paints, it's even around paints and coatings, there can be a lot of variance, in the requirements there.
I could definitely see that. I mean, I still tell people that industrial wood coatings and architectural coatings, which is wall paint, are just worlds apart. I mean, they're, how they're made up, how they're formulated, how they're batched is just a completely different process.
Right. And it reflects itself here's an example, right? So we have within the software the capability to integrate with scales and control weighing and get super accurate weight recordings. That feature becomes more and more valuable if two things. If the raw materials are more and more expensive, and if small inaccuracies in weighing can cause failed batches. So in other words, if I'm making paint for art, the precision of that color to match to the standard may be less than if I'm doing it for a car. I mean, okay, now here I'm outside of my area of expertise, but you get into okay, whether that feature of integrating with the scales is worth doing or not, because it is effort, right? Every feature you roll out is effort, whether this is where with the consulting engagement and the discovery of, with the customer comes in, is you try to figure out what pieces of that puzzle that we talked about are going to deliver ROI for them versus what their problems are, right? Right, we don't have failed batches. Everything's fine. Why do you want to integrate with the scale? There's not a problem there. Okay, fine, right? In that case, we won't.
That makes sense. I mean, I never even thought of that, but that's if you're making art paint or kids paint, Do you care if one blue is slightly lighter than the next blue? Probably not.
There's some kid somewhere who's saying like they're not the same. It's super frustrated, right?
I'd be my daughter. She'd be like, Daddy, this blue is not the same as this blue. Like, this is not going to work. You need to call someone.
Yeah, exactly.
The pickiness of them. Let's see. So, like on the technology side, are you guys seeing any type of trends and stuff moving in a certain direction as far as integrating more technology into the batching, as far as like the paint makers when it comes to running around with devices or things like that? Are you guys seeing that trend tick up any?
Yeah. So we definitely see more and more adoption of devices on the shop floor, right? So, it's actually been long the case. Some of the other industries we serve, like I mentioned, personal care, cosmetics, there's been investment in it. It sort of flows with the focus on quality, right? The more focus there is on quality, the more it kind of justifies that investment on devices on the shop floor. Because what happens, it's an interesting thing, and it's not necessarily obvious to people, right? If I have a piece of paper, right, a batch sheet that's a piece of paper, and it asks me to make recordings and so on, that's all fine, and I can keep those records. But if I do that using a computer, it also can validate and enforce rules as I go. So let's say there is a pH measurement that happens in the middle of the batch, and you make a note of it. Okay, that's fine. The quality team has to look at the paperwork afterwards to find a problem, right? The piece of paper doesn't actually stop you. Whereas you can configure the batch process in the software if you have a reading that's out of spec to say, hey, stop, right? And to actually like not allow you to proceed until something is addressed. So that,
like, stop, go get someone. Oh, genius.
Right. So it kind of makes that, so it's correlated, so the more those quality control and quality requirements have impact and have value, the more the investment is worthwhile to push those devices to the shop floor.
And you guys have the capability of the mobile devices like the iPads and all that good stuff?
For sure, yeah. We're seeing that Android is dominating in the warehouse and on these devices. So if you have a device with an integrated barcode scanner and so on, it's really Android's dominating that space now. And yeah, we have an Android app for managing what happens in the warehouse.
That makes perfect sense. Android being a lot more open source than what Apple typically is. Even though Apple was always like known as the open source free use software, but not so much anymore. I mean, it seems it's a lot harder to get stuff like that to work with Apple.
Yeah, and these are typically purpose-built devices for the shop floor. They've been ruggedized, additional ruggedization, and usually the integrated barcode scanner that's on them. So
that would be, yeah, I could see that being a huge little scan it as you use it, and if you get to a certain point where it's not supposed to be, it'll tell you to stop.
That's the other spot though where putting devices in the hands of operators can have big value is in terms of inventory accuracy, right? So as soon as your inventory records are based on a human being writing something down on a piece of paper and taking it to the office and entering it later, man, does that ever slow you down and make things less? You're and it's worse. It may seem obvious, but it's even worse than the obvious part, right? In that when you put a device on the floor, there's like opportunities that you don't have when you're writing stuff down on paper, right? So for example, we have the ability to put a license plate, a serial number on each drum, and we know what was originally in the drum. And so as you use from that drum in production, when you get to the bottom of the drum, we can say, hey, the drum, like based on production records, you've used all the inventory there. Is it empty? So there's opportunities for pop-ups and where we can reconcile, and here's an opportunity to say, hey, it's not empty. Say, okay. Did it have and now we can initiate a process like, did the vendor send you more than expected, or was one of the recipes inaccurate? Like what happened here, right? And that's really, you can't do that with paper. It's just not possible.
I mean, you can't There's no way you can't track what you put in every. I mean, the Excel spreadsheet to do that would be
Yeah.
mind-numbing to create.
Well, and that's the other flavor of problem that happens with the Excel spreadsheet. So no matter how genius your genius is in Excel, they're only one human being. And there's great power that comes from the data being entered by the human being who is actually there having the experience, right? So the person who's receiving the inventory on the dock, for them to check it in and label it and record what you've got and have the inventory reflect that instantly versus having the paperwork go to the office and having the genius put it on the Excel spreadsheet, right? So
It's like a game of telephone that way.
Right. But the problem with Excel is like, you know, you, you don't want to necessarily trust everyone to come in there and start mashing it up and breaking it, right? Whereas the, with purpose-built software, there's a lot more rails there.
I mean, it's a lot more, proven, we'll say.
Right. It understands what's happening in a way that allows it to, to say, hey, that doesn't make sense, or like, or only provide the specific access that you want to do the thing that is supposed to be done. So it becomes much harder for them to, although people will try, it becomes much harder for them to break it. Right?
Yeah. I mean, someone will always figure out how to break it. God bless. You try to prevent that as best you can, but man, there's always one guy that's just like, here, hold my beer. This is unbreakable.
Yeah. I'm gonna click every button in every combination, and we're gonna test it. We're gonna go for it. Yeah.
You said you've been there for 10 years, so that's when you guys really started to focus on the wet coatings and the batching manufacturing, correct?
Yeah. So we had a few customers in that space previously that really drove us to learn about the space. But in terms of really actively marketing and pursuing that space, around 10 years, and we've seen a lot of growth. The verticals we serve, the demand has been growing massively, right? And it is really driven again because the accounting side ERPs have been around a lot longer. But what's really driving it is now people understand that they, even as a smaller company, they can't afford a big SAP deployment. They can have their cake and eat it too, where not only is it less expensive, so being purpose built, right? It's really two birds with one stone. So it allows us to be less expensive because there's a lot less discovery and learning and configuration and customization needed for each project. But then it also makes the project easier and more. So it really, that's the big shift that we're seeing, is that companies like us are really focused, and that focus is driving more acceptance.
My wife is she works for a government contractor, and I think she said she's been there, I think this is her 18th year, and she's on the finance side. She said they've on to their second ERP because they do manufacturing. And she says, I don't think we've had one that has been less than a 2-year implementation. And countless consultants and hundreds of thousands of dollars they have paid these consultants to come across company-wide. They're a large corporation, to implement it and do all the training at all the sites. And I think a lot of people see that and they hear about ERPs and SAPs and they think of that, and it just scares the holy shit out of them. They're like, nope, not doing it. I'm out. So the take that you guys come on it is a lot simpler.
Well, that's right. And, again, again, with an SAP and so on, you're also reliant on the consultant. So there's a third party involved here as well. And that also causes issues, because not only do you have to select the right piece of software, but you're also picking the right consultant for the project. And so that's, and their level of expertise. So I do think that's another advantage we have, is we're vetting all the people who are doing the project lead and training. We're not reliant on a third party there, which, and again, I know that some of those third-party consultants are excellent and some are not, right? So it's a big variable in the project.
That's the problem. Some are awesome and some are not.
Right, exactly.
It's like, and you don't really know. I always say it's like it's the doctor theory, like the guy graduate first in his class to be a doctor, and there's a guy that graduated last in his class.
Right, who's checking the grades? Yeah,
exactly. You don't check the grades when you go. They just say that's what they do. So you're kind of like, and the tail end is when you start finding out, oh crap, I got the last guy.
It would be interesting to ask your physician for their transcripts. That would be an interesting ask.
Yeah, you need to see what was your place when you graduated school, like top 5%, bottom 5%.
Uh-huh. Oh, exactly.
We need a letter from the school that says where you graduated. So, being that you guys have kind of transitioned 10 years ago to focusing on this batching, and being that you are a small business, so a lot of guys out there, whether they're manufacturers or even painters, like ups and downs businesses have them. So what's a lesson that you've learned on the business side of running a business that, let's say you learned the hard way and was like, crap?
Sure. Running a business and growing a business, I think there's a trap that's super easy to fall into as you scale. So we're 22 people now. And so we're at the size now where I don't have my hands in everything anymore. And that was a super difficult transition to let go, right? And to let others take ownership of various parts of the business. Now it feels easy to do that, but that was a real challenge. And I think there is a tendency for founders and leaders to get this feeling like they are the ones with all the answers, and they're the ones who know everything, and giving space for others to be better at some things than you are is a really important unlock, I think. This is now I'm going to get a bit into my personal side. So I practice judo. So it's a martial art, kind of like wrestling, grappling, jiu-jitsu, and one of the big, there's lots of benefits from it. Keeps me in shape, keeps me strong, and so on. But one of the things that's lovely about it is you go there and somebody beats you up, and it's a nice reminder that you're not the best at everything, right?
And that's okay.
And that's okay. That's totally okay. And you can be good at it, and then there's still somebody who's better. And so in hiring and delegation, this is a really important lesson, twofold. It's like trust your team to do things and to execute, and give them the space to do that. And because as the leader and the founder, like, you're pulled in many directions wearing all these hats. Now suddenly you have a person and it's their full-time job just to do that one piece. They're going to very quickly, if you've hired the right person, be better at it than you were. So trust them and give them space, right? And so I think that's important. And then it's also in the hiring process is having that expectation. People always say, right, nobody, when you delegate to somebody, they're never going to do it as good as you. And I think that's such a fallacy, right? I think the expectation should always be that they're going to do it way better than you ever could, because it's their full-time job, right? So, yeah. So that for me, that was just such a pivotal lesson, because I was gripping it a little bit tight for a while there.
Yeah, and I always found that when I had my business, one thing that always got me was, anytime there's a problem, they want you to fix it. Hey, I got this problem. And I love reading books and get sucked into the rabbit hole of social media of those, business guys. And one guy came across this 1-3-1 rule. Have you heard of the 1-3-1 rule? It's a leader guy, and he owned 4 companies. And he said anytime somebody came to him with a problem, he set the expectation. I want one problem at a time. I want 3 options to solve the problem. And what is your recommendation?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's perfect.
And he said, when he started instituting that, and then I noticed it too when I started using it, they would come to you, and by the time they were telling you the 1-3-1 rule, because you set the expectation of that's what you want, by the time they got done with it, they'd already solved the problem.
Right, exactly.
And then shortly after that, it just progresses, and those calls just don't come to you anymore because they just solve it. I mean, they just work through it, and I'm like, holy crap, this worked really well. Like, so now, I mean, that's one thing that I really push is the 1-3-1 rule, because I think it gives them ownership, and you don't have to solve all the problems. I mean, that's kind of one of the pain in the butts about owning a business is being expected to solve everyone's problem.
Yeah. And it's interesting as well. Like, then the next phase of growth, you start to see that same problem happen horizontally. And what I mean by that is like, okay, now you end up with a staff member who's really good at solving a certain category of problem, and they become this like black hole of like, now everyone's throwing that at them.
Yeah.
And now you need to like take that lesson, like, okay, but we're also wanting to grow that depth of capability across the organization. So you gotta, although you're the expert, push back. And so, anyways, these are the interesting challenges that you face as you grow.
Yeah, the nuances of business ownership and growth. It's that never dull is probably the best. You got to stay on your toes.
Exactly.
So, like on the business side, whether it's what strategies do you guys implement, and have you guys used just to make sure you're either getting the best clients and or staying on top of the technologies?
In terms of getting the best clients and staying ahead of technology, it really has to circle back on our focus, right? We can go deeper and do better the more focused we are. And so, and it's always tough, right? Because of course you want new customers and you want to close business, but having the resilience to say, you know what, we're not able to showcase all of our abilities with you. It's not the best fit to work with you, and have that resilience in the sales process is just super important. And so I think that's important. And then, of course, the marketing efforts can, retain that same focus. And it goes across the organization, from the marketing through the sales process, through then the development and R&D process as well. Another big. No. I was just going to say, in the past few years as well, going virtual for us now, obviously a paint manufacturer or a painter doesn't have this option, but although they might for some departments, right? So we went virtual when COVID was happening, and we just it was like suddenly a wind at our backs. Everyone was happy to be able to work remotely, not to have to commute, and then all of a sudden now we can hire internationally. Right. So we've got now the team, we have team members across the world, and it's just that global talent pool is incredible. It's just an incredible thing to have access to, and for team members to be able to stay in the comfort of their own home and not to have to commute. It's worked really well for us. I know it's not for every business, but for us, I think we have the advantage that it's really clear for us that we have a mature team, and we know and can value everyone's contributions, right? It's not, people are not in a black box of knowing what to expect, but for us, it's really worked out well.
That's awesome. Well, congrats on that one. Where do you guys, I think I was going to say, where do you find your customers? How are you, that's the unique one, being in Toronto and being fully remote. Is it shows? Is it word of mouth? How are you guys getting your name out there?
Yeah, word of mouth and referrals is always number one, right? So we try to do an incredible job for every customer and get those referrals. That's got to be front and center. We do get quite a bit of interest through our website of people who are looking. I'm active on LinkedIn, where we get traffic through that, and now more and more we're ironically starting to show our faces more in person, at at events and trade shows and so on. That's something new for us. We're just dipping our toes in the water to see on that one and see its success. But it's a big world, but it's a small world, and referrals really go a long way. So that's just our focus, is to do a great job. Our website is a great testament to our track record. We have a ton of case studies there, and we take a lot of pride in writing case studies that really showcase the projects that we've done. And so we think that track record speaks for itself.
Yeah, I've bounced around on there a little bit, and yeah, the success stories you have on there, I mean, they're pretty impressive. I mean, there's some thought into them, not the typical 4-star Google review, 5-star Google review. They did a good job.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And it's it's kind of what I was alluding to before. Like, each project is its own puzzle, right? So yes, the more you've seen similar puzzles, the more paint manufacturers you've worked with, but each one is a story that's there to tell, where this company had these priorities and these biggest problems, and here's how we prioritized it and solved them, and what the end result was. So we love telling those stories.
I could see that'd be fun, telling the success stories. And even, I mean, some that they've started off rough, those kind of have a little validity to them when they start not so great, but they end well. And the story may start not perfect, but it ends with, perseverance, hard work, and we fixed it. And they end up being happy.
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's pretty awesome. So we'll kind of switch gears here a little bit, a little bit on the business side. So what advice would you give to guys out there doing the remote, whether you're an employee or an employer? Since you guys have been, highly successful at it, what advice would you give to anybody out there that's looking at that avenue to get new talent?
In terms of finding talent, really take advantage of the global talent pool, right? So now broaden your search to include anyone. LinkedIn is a fantastic tool for finding people. We've used it again and again, and found incredible people. So I would say that's number one. And there's tools out there that also make it easy to compensate them. Again, for us, to some degree, it was easy in that our work with our customers has always been mostly remote, right? So we do discovery at the start of projects where we come on site very often, and then afterwards it's fully remote. So it wasn't a big transition for us in terms of delivering the product. That was already there. It was in terms of interacting with each other. So and I'll admit that the challenge is not getting too siloed, right? So you have less reason to talk to, engage with team members, right? So you have to create those opportunities a little bit more artificially, right? There has to be there is benefit to the sales team and the engineers knowing each other and being friends, right? There's benefit there, because then the engineer tells the salesperson no. Now, how does the conversation go after that? Well, if they kind of know each other and I know what your dog's name is, that conversation goes one way. And if it's a total stranger, the conversation goes a different way, right? So you do need to find a way to create those connections. And, we haven't totally cracked the code on it, but we're just constantly putting shots on the board, trying to create, opportunities to connect. And that's worked for us so far.
I was talking to, who was Donna, a girl named Donna. She was with a company called FSG, and they went to remote. And one thing that I found interesting that she said that they do is not mandatory, but mandatory. Once a week or once a month, sometimes twice a month, they do happy hours, virtual happy hours. They do a big group, and it's, made to be at the end of the day, everyone just kind of grabbing a beer, sit down, let's just talk about stuff. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything about work related, but just in a big group Zoom. And she said that was one thing that they implemented that they were seeing a lot of positive feedback off of, because it got everyone talking about stuff other than work and knowing people, even though you don't see them. One's in Florida and one's in Toronto. You get to, shoot the shit with them once a week or once a month. So I thought that was unique.
We've done some stuff like that. We have like a virtual coffee break we do on Fridays, for one of our departments. But it's the challenges are interesting. There's this thing that happens with virtual meetings that's not intuitive, but it makes sense once you encounter it. The more people you have, the more structure you need, right? So if you have lots of people at an in-person event, they naturally break off into little groups and mingle and right. But like here, we've got a single communication band, right? And everyone has to talk. So you get 8 people. It's like, whose turn is it to talk? Right.
I could see that.
So then you end up, past 4 people, you start to really need structure. Like it's okay. You run a meeting with an agenda. That's structure, obviously. But now for a social event, it's like, you start to either need to have like a little game for people to play or start to have something like that. Otherwise, you end up with just a couple of people talking, and it's not so great.
Yeah, it could go off the rails pretty quick. Yeah, I could see that. Game playing, that would be a good one, like on virtual, some type of game that interacts everybody, like a trivia game or something.
Absolutely. There's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of stuff that's free. It's just like, yeah, you just got to find a little game to play and get people involved for sure.
2 things at the end I like to do when I come to the end of these. First one is, being that I've been in the industry for a while, both as a user, influencer, and a manufacturer, is there anything that I could help you guys with on the coding side? Any advice, anything you've wanted to ask a manufacturer that isn't related to a customer?
That's interesting. I mean, I would be curious to know, as somebody who's been there and seen it at factories, what is for you a technical challenge that you've seen that you have not seen a solution to? That's just a straight up problem that's unsolved.
Between myself and when I was on a committee, I would say the number one issue on the manufacturing side is a simple way to do SDS and data sheets and safety data sheets and technical data sheets. They are time consuming. They typically have to be done by an engineer or the chemist who is making the coding. Something in the way that would simplify that process and then also make it accessible. Like whether it's linked to a SharePoint server for everyone in the company to have access to, because once they're made, then becomes the issue of getting them out there. And smaller manufacturers, I think regional guys, that's really a struggle for regional manufacturers, is the data sheets, because every year someone needs a new data sheet. And if something changed, if there's a button you could go push and say, and it generates the PDF or based on the region and what it is all set up, that would be game changing. Even if it was a service that you guys offer to go in and set up all their products, and once a year you go in and update it for a smaller fee, but then they're all in there and you're not relying on a chemist who's probably got 10 projects to do it.
Got it. I'm busily taking notes here, Zach. That's great.
Usually I'm turning this around and I'm the one taking notes, but you just straight flip that one on me. Good call.
No, that's a good one. Love it.
So, I mean, I would say that's probably the biggest one as far as what being on the sales side and kind of helping with the production side. That's probably a big hurdle. And when you get into the technical director side, a way to have easy, quick access to quality control results would be another huge one. So if you're traveling and someone's having an issue, if you could log on in a matter of 10 minutes and pull up the quality control results on said batch to know if there's any distinct issues that you could go, oh, okay.
That one I think we're pretty close to being able to solve.
Oh, there we go. Awesome.
Yeah, we do have customers doing that, but so that one's not too bad. The safety data sheet one is that's a muddier challenge for us, because and I'll just throw this out there. Like, I think what makes the safety data sheet challenge so hard is the reservoir of data that you have to have. I should. One of the reasons it's hard is you must know the chemical safety properties of all of the materials, right, that go in to, and then, and again, now speaking as a non-chemist, non-formulator, right, we'd have to learn the rules and turn the rules into math so that we can do them. But okay, we have two chemicals that are safe and are relatively inert, but like, do we know that when you mix them together, something weird doesn't happen? Well, how do we know that, right? How do we know?
Well, and then you have like the CAS numbers that's on, every single raw material and solvent. There's CAS numbers on there, but then you're relying on the raw material manufacturer to have the correct data in there. There's no. I think that's always been like that holy grail that every manufacturer would want.
Yeah. Now we do have a safety data sheet tool module that allows our users to construct the safety data sheets, but it's really a formatting tool. Like, we know what the document's supposed to look like and what the different, hazard codes and hazard statements are. We can give you a menu to choose and all of that. But ultimately, yeah, it's down to the user to assess what the safety characteristics of the material are. And so that would be the magic piece, right? For it to be able to make that determination in an automated fashion.
Or even, without getting too much information, if you had let's say a chemist that was, I won't say on retainer, but you contracted out to hold a private webinar to talk maybe a non-chemist technical guy and how to create one the quickest and easiest way. But then, you would be providing a private class that you would charge X for, or even provide as a service to your customers to do like a 2-3 hour training on, we're going to step-by-step walk through with the chemist. So when you have CAS numbers, he can be like, oh yeah, here this, here that, blah, blah, blah.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah. Training. I mean, I'm big. Training is one thing to me that I think there's just far too little of in the painting world in general, whether it's end user or manufacturing. We all get into a huge hurry to fill demands, and the training aspect of it always gets skipped.
Well, yeah, training couldn't be more important for an ERP rollout, I can tell you that.
Yeah, well, that is for sure. We did lots of training. So the last thing that I always like to get people on is we kind of talked about, like, what's Alex outside of Markov? I mean, you mentioned judo, like family, kids. So what do you like to do? What's family life outside of work?
For sure. I got two kids. I got a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, about to be 8 actually in a couple of weeks here. So, aside from judo, that's my number one time commitment is my kids. My wife and I, we like to do stuff outside, get physical, lots of sports, bike riding, skiing. I'm big on the sports that I can participate in. That's actually, again, part of why I like judo. I got back into doing judo so that I could do it with my kids. I did it as a kid, and then I came back now, and now I'm back into doing competitions and all of that. But what I really love about it is I can help coach and participate. I participate in the kids class and get out there as an assistant sensei and do all that. I like to get on the field with the kids as much as I can because it's where you get the connection. Although, obviously you follow their interests. My son started baseball this year. He's stoked about that. So
my son's kind of wanting to talk about baseball. He's going to turn 7, and I'm 41, and I can count with one hand the amount of times I've played baseball. Probably just one.
Oh no, I thought you were going to go rotator cuff injury on that one. I thought it was going to be too much baseball, but yeah.
I was a football, wrestling, basketball, hunting. So my son's wanting to hunt. So since we moved down to Waco, that's one thing I'm looking for is land where I can take him hunting, because he's been wanting to go hunting so bad. It's horrible. But he also won't let you smash a roach because it's an animal. So I'm like, these two things aren't lining up, buddy. When it comes time to pull that trigger, I'm just like, I don't think this is going to work. But the baseball one, I don't know why I never got into baseball, but man, he's just loving it. And he's a left-handed one. So everyone wants, the coaches are like, yeah, have him come out. He's a lefty. And I'm like, Yeah, but he can't throw and he can't catch because I don't know how to teach a left-handed kid how to do anything.
Exactly. Man, being a lefty is an advantage in so many sports. I mean, same with judo. It's like almost like boxing. It's like nobody sees you coming. It's just like, what the heck? The way you move is alien to me, and you are full of like an endless bag of tricks. It's just magical.
The alien side of it is very true. I mean, trying to teach him how to throw a football, how to, write, just anything. And I'm like, play golf. I used to play a lot of golf in high school and college, and trying to teach him how to play golf. Like, lefties do it so different.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, it's just gotta like you watch me and do it in reverse. It's about as much as I can. Because honestly, I'm sure if I tried to throw a ball with my left hand, it would not be pretty.
Man, awesome. Well, I won't keep you too much longer. Alex, I appreciate you coming on. It was a great show. Some awesome insights. Shoot out your social medias, your website, kind of let everyone know how they can find you online for anybody out there that wants to reach out and follow you and ask any questions they've got.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Alex Koves on LinkedIn. That's Alex Koves, and I actually post a lot. I made my resolution about a year ago, and I'm quite active. I love to engage with people and get into the nitty gritty around manufacturing on there. So I love to connect with anyone.
Perfect. Yeah, you got some awesome posts. I always love seeing them come up. They always strike some interesting conversations.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's I really like to get way down in the weeds. So some people like that. Some people are just like, what is Alex on about the different ways of weighing materials? But hey, that's
I do the same thing when it comes to coatings, man. I can get in the weeds and people are like, dude, it's paint. And I'm like, no.
What are you talking about? It's exciting.
Exactly. So anyways, we'll wrap it up here, man. Alex, again, thanks for coming on the Bearded Finisher. I hope everyone enjoyed this episode. Excited to get you on again and talk maybe a little deeper, a little broader about the ERP stuff. Stay tuned for the next episode, everybody. We've got it coming out every Monday, and we look forward to seeing everybody next time.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Bearded Finisher Podcast. We thank everyone for joining. Keep hustling, keep learning, and never settle for anything less than your best. Remember, the path to perfection is a journey, not a destination. Until next time.